Now it's time for our guest segment, and our guest today is a legendary comedian, actor, TV, and radio personality. You can hear him every weeknight as the host of Tell Me Everything on the SiriusXM Progress channel, and he has a wonderful new book out entitled Separation of Church and Hate: A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. Please give a warm-ass welcome to New York Times best-selling author John
That's right. That's
Fugelsang.
right. Get that in there. Get that one in there. Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me back.
I am so excited to have you. How are you, my love?
I'm good. I'm a little tired, but I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm gonna need you to sit still for a few minutes while I kiss your ass over this book.
Oh my
I am
God.
I'm loving it. It is funny, it is informative, it's interesting. Even if I weren't interested in the topic, which I am, it's just a great read. And I find myself as a someone who's Jewish, but works for a church during as
Oh
my
yeah,
full-time
that's
job.
right.
I
That's
find
right.
myself learning so much that I never knew about the Bible, about the evolution of the church and Christianity and the way that it changed over the centuries. I know that writing this book was a labor for you. Was it a labor of love for you? What inspired you to do this?
Wow. Thank you so much. It took many years of pitching a book that was geared towards atheists and believers of all faiths about how to use the Bible to deal with right-wing Christians. Um, I can remember back in like 2010 when I first submitted my first proposal for it and having an editor at HarperCollins explain to me, I don't know any Christian fundamentalists. They don't impact my life in any way.
Yeah.
Cut to now where they are trying to force a very narrow right-wing Jesus-free version of Christianity down everybody's throats. Um, I grew up abnormally Catholic. My mother was a former nun, and my father was a former Franciscan brother.
Yes.
Grew up very, very social justice Catholic, very, church all the time, every holy day, but also MLK and Gandhi and Dorothy Day and Catholic Charities, all about Christian activism, resisting Christian authoritarianism. And so my first big memory was my dad pulling me out of bed late one night to drag me off to his bedroom, like on a school night. I was sleeping, but he wanted to wake me up to watch Jimmy Carter signing the Camp David peace accord between Israel and Egypt. He couldn't believe an American Christian had brought peace to Israel and Egypt, and he wanted his kid there to witness this moment. And I didn't understand it, but I could tell from his face how much it meant to him. And growing up, if you grew up Christian in America, there came a certain point where it sort of seems like the whole faith got hijacked. If you were
Right.
raised with this Christianity of empathy, you grow up and it's suddenly these televangelists and these old segregationists have used abortion to hijack this whole movement that was about peace and social justice and looking out for the lowest among us.
But your book explains that it was hijacked actually almost from the very beginning. Explain
Yeah.
to the listeners how the teachings of Jesus were almost immediately perverted by the Church of Christianity and by the practitioners of Christianity. How did this happen?
Well, I mean,
You
Jesus
you
was
point to Paul. You seem to make Paul the bad guy.
Well, I don't totally blame Paul. Paul, it's not Paul's fault that he's the bad guy, if that makes sense. So you have this world of Roman occupied Judea, and the Jewish people don't have their freedom. They live under imperial occupation. Women are second class citizens and are not allowed to be educated. And in the middle of all of this guy is born who some say had divine magical powers, and he was a radical, non-violent political dissident who did not align with the conservative religious bosses, did not align with the Jews who wanted violent overthrow of the oppressive Romans, but instead said that he had come to reform the law of the Torah, to fulfill it, and essentially replace the law with a whole new commandment about love, that the law had served its purpose, and that he is here to say, it used to be eye for an eye, but I'm telling you, turn the other cheek. That's the whole Sermon on the Mount. It's him doing this new covenant. It's him saying, hey, it used to be you aren't allowed to hate your brother. I'm telling you, you're not allowed to hate your enemy.
Right.
A whole new way of seeing the world. And he upset many of the conservative religious bosses. He was certainly a threat to the occupying army of Rome. And so eventually he was arrested by a small portion of conservative religious authorities and an imperial authority, an imperial government, and executed in the most painful and humiliating of ways.
Yes.
And we're taught this story as little kids before we can understand what any of that actually means.
Right.
We're just taught, oh, look, he healed the blind. We're not taught about why his teachings were a threat to authoritarian power 2,000 years ago and why they are today. Why the actual teachings of Jesus are kryptonite to the MAGA movement and to guys like Donald Trump.
For me, the thesis of your book, and this plays into exactly what you just said about MAGA, the thesis is crystallized on page 36. When you talk about Matthew 25 and the judgment of nations, you write, Jesus asserts that his true followers are the people and the societies who care for the poor, the sick, the marginalized, the immigrants, and the incarcerated. And he tells who his fake followers are, the ones who are openly religious but indifferent to those groups.
This is the famous parable of the goats and the sheep. It's also known as I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And they said, when did we do this? When you did it for the least of my people, you did it for me. And I was a stranger and you didn't welcome me. When did we do that? When you didn't do it for the least of my people, you didn't do it for me. And he says he's going to send all the individuals and nations who denied him because they denied the poor, the sick, the immigrant, and the incarcerated. And that's who goes to hell. Now, you ever notice they never fight to put this on a courthouse wall or a classroom wall? They never fight to put the actual teachings of Jesus anywhere because Christian nationalists are here to fight for Jesus, not to listen to him. And when the Roman Empire first took over Christianity and began using this movement of nonviolence and peace and love and empathy and helping the poorest among us is the highest priority. And when Rome takes over this operation, I even past Paul, but Rome decides to start using this as a conquering religion. And suddenly, this nonviolent, homeless Jewish mystic faith healers movement is an imperial army slaughtering Jews, slaughtering pagans, slaughtering Muslims.
Yeah.
That was when Jesus first got weaponized, and that was the beginning of authoritarian Christianity. It was St. Francis of Assisi who quit the war and preached nonviolence and walked unarmed through a war zone to host peace talks between a Muslim sultan and an army of Rome. And it was then that began this tradition that the whole history of Christianity, since Rome took over, has been authoritarian douchebags violating everything Jesus ever commanded in Jesus's name. We're going to murder people, but we're going to do it for Jesus. Columbus slaughtered people, but he did it in the shadow of the cross. They began telling themselves it's okay to violate all of Jesus's commandments on how we're supposed to treat others, as long as we do it for him. As long as we force the Indians to be Christian and force the slaves to be Christian, it's okay that we're violating Jesus. And everywhere in history, every step of the way, there were actual people who said no and called bullshit and followed the teachings of Jesus. Christianity propped up what Columbus was doing to the Taino people, but it was the Catholic priest on his boat that was the first act of protest by a white person in this hemisphere. Father Bartolomeo de las Casas protested the way he was treating the indigenous people. They knew back then that Columbus was inhuman and fucked up and anti-Jesus. Slavery was propped up by Christianity, and it was the Quakers and Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, real Jesus followers, who resisted. That's the whole history of the faith right up through Trump.
This is what's important is that as much as the left, some on the left, politically always slam Christians and say Christians suck, Christians are hypocrites, Christians are bullshit. There
Yeah,
are, in fact, and have been real Christians who actually do follow Jesus and have fought for social justice and for the poor and the marginalized. The problem
always.
is they're not the ones who seem to get the spotlight enough of the
No,
time. And
correct.
and you take on many of the tenets of right-wing evangelicism in your book. One is that Christianity is anti-feminist. Another is that it's anti-gay. Can you sort of take those apart for our listeners the way that you do in the
I'd
book?
love
I
to.
know you spend a lot of time on it in the book, but sort of briefly, how is it that Jesus is in fact not anti-feminist and not anti-gay,
Yeah,
but
I'd love
quite the
to.
opposite?
Let me do it by responding to your previous comment, right? Like we hear this argument all the time that religion's responsible, Christianity is responsible for all the oppression of women and homophobia and violence. And I'm always like, no, man, not Christianity. The extreme fundamentalist conservative wings of Christianity. In every religion, those are the guys ruining the religion. Who's ruining Islam? Is it the moderate and liberal Muslims like Dino Badala? Who's ruining Judaism? Is it the moderate and liberal Jews? No. Hindu? All of them. I'm sure Scientology has these dicks as well. The extreme conservative wings of all the religions are the ones oppressing the women, having all the sex hang-ups, justifying all the violence, always pushing punishment instead of healing, and always claiming it's okay because we've been so oppressed, we're allowed to be douchebags now. They all violate what their holy books say because their own religion is power, right? That's it. Their own religion is power. That's MAGA. Donald Trump got MAGA on his side not by promising to do what Christ commands. He did it by saying, I'm going to put you on top.
Right.
So Jesus shows up and his whole movement rejects all of that, right? Like it's all about going to the margins and helping the poor. My kingdom is not of this earth. His whole thing is overturning the old way of looking at things. So women are legal property in his age. Okay. And Jesus, women couldn't be educated. Uh, Women had no rights of inheritance. Men could have concubines if they had money, but if a guy was tired of his wife, all he had to do was just say, "I divorce you," and it was
Right.
over. Like a marriage was a marriage was a business deal between two men, the father of the bride and the father of the groom. And women
Yes.
would be married off when they were 13, and if a guy got tired of her, kicked her out. And if she didn't have family to go live with, it was prostitution or begging. That was how this world was. Jesus shows up and overturns all of this. Okay, he's the most feminist guy in the Bible. He teaches women, which was illegal at the time. And we're not taught this. The whole scene where he's at Mary, with the apostles at Mary and Martha's, the sister of Lazarus, and Martha's mad because Mary's sitting there and learning from Jesus while she's doing all the cooking and cleaning, and Jesus says, "Hey, Martha, chill out. Mary's made her choice." And as a kid, I always felt bad for Martha. She's doing all the work, but they don't teach us the context that Jesus was breaking the law by teaching a woman, and sitting at Jesus's feet meant she was the most cherished pupil. And it's literally Jesus telling oppressed women that education is more important than housework.
Right.
Like, they don't teach us the context of the story. When the bleeding woman, who's been bleeding for 12 years, touches Jesus and she's healed, it's in that great Sam Cooke song. And like, they don't teach us that women were ritually unclean. Women's bodies have been weaponized against them for
Right. When a
2,000
woman
years
had
by
her
religion.
period, no one was allowed to touch her. She was not allowed to be in company
Not allowed to
in
be in
public.
public.
Right.
She made everyone in that crowd rich. So she made Jesus, according to the religious conservatives, she made Jesus ritually unclean in the eyes of God because she was so unclean. This is what the extreme conservative members of the Pharisees harped on. These little man-made rules, right? That because she was bleeding, so she endangered everyone in that crowd. Jesus doesn't care. He says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." The only time he ever calls anyone in the Bible daughter. And it's to this filthy, religiously impure woman who just broke the law to make him impure in the eyes of God. This woman breaks the taboo, and Jesus ends the taboo for good. Time after time, he is relentlessly treating women as equals. Women financed his ministry. That's in the Bible. That's who were the executive producers of all this stuff. The first people he appears to after he dies are women. Then Jesus dies and leaves us. And then Paul takes over. And Paul is both a Roman citizen and a Pharisee. So when he has his road to Damascus moment and becomes a Jesus follower and no longer persecutes Christians, he can travel all through the Roman Empire selling his version of the Jesus story. The apostles don't get to do that because they're not Roman citizens and because they're all being murdered by Paul's old buddies back home. So Paul's the only one left in the end, this guy who didn't even know Jesus, and his version of Christianity is the one that takes root because being a Roman citizen, he's allowed to travel all around and set up churches. And Paul's version is like, yeah, it's like Judaism, but hey, you keep your foreskin and have bacon. And it's incredibly popular. And within 300 years, the Roman Empire makes it the state religion. Like literally, they take over the fan club of the guy they executed.
Right.
And ever since then, it's been a battle of Christians choosing either to align with power, with Caesar, or to resist it and stand against authoritarian power like Jesus did. And so every generation of Christianity, you'll see the authoritarian, extreme conservative Christians. I'm talking segregation, homophobia, labor rights, women's rights, the European slavery. It's always the extreme conservatives who are doing the opposite of Jesus and fighting for power. And then there's the Christ followers, usually powerless citizens, who are using the teachings of Jesus to resist these douchebags. That's the story that's playing out right now.
One of the things you make the point about repeatedly in the book is those who claim that to believe the Bible literally. I believe the Bible literally. Everything the Bible says, I believe literally. Well, then that means they believe in a talking snake. They believe in a talking donkey. And by the way, I never knew there was a talking donkey in the Bible till I read your book.
Yeah.
They believe
Balaam's donkey.
they believe that two bears came out of the wilderness and immediately mauled 42 children
It's my
to death.
favorite story. My favorite story. Yeah,
I'm
42.
laughing only because of the way you point out.
I spent 2 pages on this. The prophet Elisha is walking up a hill, and these kids come out and they start jeering at him, saying, "Go on up, you bald head! Go on up, bald head!" And he turns and calls a curse of the Lord down on these kids, and two bears come out of the forest and maul 42 children.
And
And as a kid, I'm like, I have to believe every word of this to be a good person. Like, I have to believe every word of this to be a good person.
no,
And
but
I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with the physics. How did two bears kill 42 kids? What superpowers? Because the kids would disperse and run in every direction, right, Adam? Just think about the physics on this.
and the
There's
other
no. I spent 2 pages trying to break down how, as a kid, I tried to rationalize how this could be true. Because seeing it as metaphor that you shouldn't disrespect your elders or the prophets was never presented as an option. I just thought I have to believe this. So if they were in a deep pit and the kids couldn't climb out, it would take days, but the bears could eventually rip every one. Maybe maul doesn't mean they killed them. Maybe maul means they got trampled and they lived or were only crippled for like I had to believe it to be a good person. And that's what religion does.
the other part that made me laugh out loud is when you you talk about how God gave Adam Eve only after finding all of the other animals in the Garden of Eden to be unsuitable mates for him.
I was the only kid in Sunday school who was terrified by this story. I was like, wait a minute, because there's two different versions, right? Genesis chapter 1, and again, try this out on your Uncle Racist and Aunt Dead Inside at Thanksgiving. Genesis chapter 1, God creates man and woman at the same time in his own image. Woman created in his own image, in God's
Right.
own image. They prefer Genesis chapter 2. Completely different story where God makes man first. I guess he makes male and female of every animal except man. And he gives man this big butch job of giving names to all the animals in the Garden of Eden. And when it proved that man was lonely and none of these animals proved a suitable companion for him, I was the only kid in Sunday school like, what the hell was that about? What were those auditions like? Like who did Adam try out as a mate exactly? Was it ferrets or raccoons or like pine cones? What who gets the rose in this ceremony? But eventually, God takes his rib while he's sleeping and fashions it into Eve. You can't believe both.
I'm telling you, it's a very funny book.
You can't believe both. Which one do you believe? Ask your loved ones. Like anyone who says that they believe every word of the Bible is literal fact hasn't read all of the Bible, and they're counting on you not having read it either.
John, we're going to play my favorite game, Ask Me No Questions, in a moment. But the one question that I couldn't answer after reading the book was where you fall as far as faith goes. Are you a person of faith, or is this book more of an academic and political exercise for you?
First off, that is the first time I've really been asked that question that directly, and I'm so flattered. If you can't tell what I believe from this book, then that means I'm not pushing religion on anybody.
Oh, I
So
don't think
I
you're
feel really
definitely
good.
not.
I know. I'm not pushing like I don't. All I'm pushing on people is like, you know, going. If you're going to call yourself Christian, go by what Christ actually said. Don't use him as a mascot. don't go telling me how Christian you are while you support blowing up people in fishing boats in Venezuela. Um, but my own belief is for a while I called myself a carb, a Christian anti-religion believer. But I'm not anti-religion at all. I do believe in God because I think it's important to be able to blame somebody every day. I can't get up in the morning without someone to blame. For me, that just knowing that I have a deity to blame all my problems on, it just that's what gets me through. That gives me faith. So, I believe like listen. Here's what I believe in spiritual fluidity, and what works for you is truth when you're 7 years old. It's okay if it doesn't work for you when you're 22. And what works for you spiritually when you're 30, it's okay if that doesn't work for you when you're 60. I think that sometimes outgrowing the religion you were programmed with, outgrowing the spirituality you were programmed with, and then realizing that it's totally okay to change your mind about spirituality can be the most spiritual thing you can do. So I've always believed in God, but I also don't believe that God's an invisible man with a big fuck off Old Testament beard and a penis in the sky throwing down lightning bolts on people. Um, my father, well, and in terms of religion, maybe sometimes realizing that you've outgrown your church is God's way of telling you it's time to move on and that you're moving on in your journey and that your church has given you all your church can give you. My parents were in the clergy and they once took a vow of celibacy and obedience and piety, and then they had a different spiritual calling. And sometimes changing your whole mind about spirituality or what you think God is the most sacred, spiritual, holy, natural thing you can do. So before my dad died, he said to me, there are two things God can't do. He can't stop loving you, and he can't stop forgiving you. And so that's my religious belief, what my dad said.
All right. Well, we can't do Ask Me No Questions now because that was too
I know it's
poignant.
so heavy, wasn't
No, it
it?
was
Like,
beautiful, but I
wow,
don't want to hit you with a bunch of bullshit now.
I had like a button on it and everything. It was so fun. Actually, my dad's fine. He's perfectly healthy. Lives in Cleveland. No, hardcore MAGA. We hate each other.
No, that's not true.
No, but it's true. I mean, but like, you know, they always said to me growing up, the opposite of faith is doubt. And I don't believe that at all. I think doubt is an important part of any faith journey. If you have doubt, but
Well,
then it's not
and
faith. The opposite of faith is certainty. And it's
definitely
this
in the Jewish tradition, we're meant to question and argue, and
everything.
the more
And so,
religious you are, the more you argue about what the Talmud and the Torah and the
yes.
yeah.
And so
Um,
much of the Jesus arguing with the Pharisees that has been used to justify so much anti-Semitism over the years, so much of those arguments, and Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg says this in my book, it's just Jews throwing down, debating scripture. Like
yes,
they're just having at it like we do. And I love it when you view it in that context, that Jesus came up in this like incredibly Jewish community, but his whole thing is not about obedience to man-made laws. Jesus' whole thing is about going beyond whatever the hell your religion taught you into a deeper kind of love.
John,
And his whole thing is about transformation, not about power.
can people see you live and in person anywhere coming up?
Oh God, yeah, I'll be playing in DC at Union Stage. I think we're filming that show on the 12th of November. Yeah, 12th of November, and I'm doing the Nation Cruise, and I'm doing some live show in San Francisco with Jerry Brown in the first week of November, but I don't know the date. And then next year on tour with, to a town near you.
Should we send people to johnfugelsang.com for all the dates and information?
You can do that. We just lost our webmaster and are trying to get that back and running. So go on down there. Yeah, my book's out, by the way. So I thought I'd have this be the time that my website gets slowed down because
Perfect.
that's how I operate.
John
Um,
Fugelsang, the book is called Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock Fleecing Frauds.
did I really blow it at getting asked me? No, did I really blow at getting the questions? Because I'm
Yeah, because
totally
the
ready.
Zoom window is going to end in 30 seconds, but I
Okay.
love you. You are always welcome on my podcast.
Thank you, Adam.
I adore you. Thank you so much, and congratulations on all your success.
Thanks
You
for
can
having
follow
me.
today's guest co-host Patrick Bod on Instagram at Patrick_Bod. Thank you all for listening. Subscribe to the ass at dnrstudios.com. Don't forget to follow
You
me
made
on
me
Insta.
get sincere. You made me get sincere on
Don't
your
forget to
ass
follow
show.
me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Adam Sank, on TikTok at Adam Sank Official. Email me at adam@adamsank.com. Go to adamsank.com for information and tickets to all my upcoming shows. Happy November, bitches, and we'll see you next month. Praise Jesus.
Holla back.
Bye.